Tonight, on First at 9 this Friday, the 1st of August 2025. Tariff tumble. US reciprocal tariffs against Sri Lanka down to 20% from 30%. New tariff rates to come into effect on the 7th of August. The rule of law. 300 police officers suspended during the past few months, asserts Minister of Public Security. Further vows to prosecute all law-breaking public officials regardless of official titles and designations. Buckle up! All passengers travelling on rear seats of motor vehicles on the expressway ordered to wear seat belts. Reform rift. Teachers and principals made aware of education reforms. Union split on future progress of the reforms. Prime Minister welcomes suggestions to improve the reform proposals.
Men, Paladins, Jovita, Baleak.
This is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Derana First at 9. I'm Aditya Drisingha joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Brought to you by the only Sri Lankan media network to rise to the pinnacle across all media platforms. Recognized as the best by every survey and beloved by the people. Now your top story tonight, reciprocal tariffs imposed on Sri Lankan exports to the United States were brought down from 30% to 20% today, hours before the August 1st trade deadline. The White House notes that the revised tariff rates will come into effect on the 7th of August. Speaking to media, Secretary to the Finance Ministry Dr. Harshana Surya Peruma asserts that the government intends to hold discussions to explore avenues to further reduce tariff rates while hailing the current reduction as a massive win for the country.
Declaring Liberation Day, President Trump announced the decision to impose tariffs of 10% against several countries. However, the declared tariffs were even higher for 60 nations or trading blocs that maintain high trade deficit with the United States. US President Donald Trump initially imposed a tariff rate of 44% in April for Sri Lankan exports. The rate, however, was then dropped to 30% as outlined in a letter directed to President Anurukumara Dissanayake dated the 10th of July. Thereafter, the Sri Lankan government commenced negotiations, eyeing a target of reducing the 30% tariff rate even further in view of maintaining price competitiveness of Sri Lankan exports. Against this backdrop, US President Donald Trump announced a new tariff plan with a few hours remaining till the August 1st trade deadline. According to the US's new plan, the reciprocal tariff rate imposed against Sri Lanka was brought down to 20%. The tariff rate imposed on regional competitor India was reduced to 25% from 26%, while the tariff rate against Bangladesh was dropped to 20% from 37%. The tariff rate imposed against Pakistan also dropped to 19% from 29%. Nations subject to comparatively higher rates of reciprocal tariffs include Laos and Myanmar facing 40%, Switzerland facing 39%, Iraq facing 35%, and Serbia also facing 35%. The imposition of new tariff rates introduced by the Trump administration is expected to commence on the 7th of August this year. Speaking at a media briefing today, Secretary to the Finance Ministry Dr. Harshana Surya Peruma hailed the reduction of US reciprocal tariff rates as a commendable achievement.
We must particularly appreciate the intervention of the President who led us to success from the very outset of the negotiations. I would like to also extend my gratitude to the special team comprising Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, Senior Economic Advisor to the President Dumindu Hulangamuwa, Secretary to the Ministry of Trade Vimalendra Raja, and Sri Lankan Ambassador to the United States Mahinda Samarasinghe. The collaborative efforts of this team led us to success. Trade negotiations are very tiring and typically time-consuming. However, in this instance, we were provided only 90 days. US officials provided us all necessary support day and night. We are indeed very thankful to them. They assisted us while also handling negotiations with many other countries. Our discussions were geared towards ensuring sustainability of Sri Lankan exporters and businesses while also maintaining price competitiveness. Rather than focusing on the tariff percentage, the aim was to maintain our market share while also competing within the international market with regional competitors exporting similar goods and services. Through business communities, We were appraised of the opportunities that lie ahead in stark contrast to the challenges. This depicts the mutually beneficial nature of this tariff framework. We see this as a massive victory for the country. Several other facts, however, must be ascertained to ensure that this victory continues on. We intend to hold discussions to explore avenues to further reduce the tariff rates, which were lowered for Sri Lanka in comparison to other peer economies. We will hold further discussions to vigilantly explore more opportunities with our US counterparts.
Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa issued a statement expressing relief over the much lower 20% reciprocal tariff imposed against Sri Lanka, in a stark contrast to India, which faces a tariff rate of 25%. The opposition leader further emphasised the need for Sri Lanka to aim for tariff rates below 15% to provide a substantial boost to Sri Lankan exporters. He also called for the establishment of a dedicated team comprising trade economists and lead negotiators to proactively engage in ongoing trade discussions and ensure continued progress. Meanwhile, parliamentarian of the Samagi Jana Balawegaya Dr. Harsha De Silva asserts that the reduction of tariffs, which followed high-stakes negotiations, must not be lauded as political victories.
අද උදෑසන වෙද්දී සුබ ආරංචියක් ලංකාවට හම්බ වුණා 130ක් තිබිච්ච බද්ද 20 අඩු වෙලා තියෙනවා. සතුටුයිද?
ඔව් සතුටුයි. අපි මොන දේශපාලන පක්ෂේ හිටියා.
I believe that Sri Lanka should always be our first priority, no matter which political party we represent. If tariffs for Sri Lanka were set at rates rendering competition with peer economies impossible, looming ahead would be a far darker predicament. I do not wish to name any names here, but many contributed to this battle at Sri Lanka's hour of need. This is a victory achieved by many collectively. I don't view this as a political win.
Meanwhile, acknowledging the new US tariff framework, leader of the Sarvajana Balaya parliamentarian Dilip Jayavira, through an ex-post, hailed the development as positive progress from the 44% tariff rate announced on the 2nd of April. He went on to note that Sri Lanka must engage in regular and comprehensive dialogue as a post-crisis management strategy, adding that steps to diversify Sri Lanka's export basket in terms of quantity, quality and export locations have seen little to no progress. In the meantime, the United National Party welcomed President Donald Trump's executive order, further reducing the reciprocal tariffs imposed against Sri Lankan exports. The UNP, in its statement, went on to quote Section 2B of the executive order, which outlines that certain foreign trading partners identified in Annex 1 to the executive order have agreed to or are on the verge of concluding meaningful trade and security agreements with the United States. Goods of those trading partners will remain subject to the additional ad valorem duties provided in Annex 1 to this order until such time as those agreements are concluded. As such, President Trump, through the executive order, claims to have issued subsequent orders memorializing the terms of those agreements. The United National Party called on the government to issue a clear public statement outlining the nature and terms of the meaningful trade and security agreements referred to in the order. In the meantime, tariffs of 10% imposed on selected goods imported from Sri Lanka into the United States under the Most Favoured Nation tariff framework will continue to be in effect. Such goods will be exempt from the 20% reciprocal tariffs. Sri Lankan authorities are carrying out further negotiations with US trade representatives on ensuring that the 10% MFN tariff imposed on over 1,200 HS codes is either maintained at the same level or reduced further. The United States will continue to implement the MFN tax framework, while tariffs imposed on several agro-exports, including tea, will continue to remain the same. Meanwhile, the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce commended the government as well as the National Negotiation Team on the successful reduction of US reciprocal tariffs from 30% to 20%. CCC Chairperson Krishan Balendra noted that it is important to use this window of opportunity to work towards a long-term arrangement that ensures more stable and competitive market access for Sri Lanka's exporters. The Plastics and Rubber Institute of Sri Lanka meanwhile extended its appreciation for the reduction of US tariffs to 20%. PRISL noted with the final tariff structure now in place, the entity is optimistic that demand for Sri Lankan rubber and plastic products in the US market will rebound to levels experienced before the reciprocal tariff measures were introduced. Meanwhile, the Joint Apparel Association Forum welcomed the revised reciprocal tariff rate of 20% on Sri Lankan exports to the United States and commended the government for its steadfast efforts in securing this critical outcome for the apparel sector. Draft asserted that the revised tariff rate brings Sri Lanka into closer alignment with other leading apparel exporting nations in the region, including Bangladesh, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia and Pakistan, thereby ensuring a more level playing field and preserving the competitiveness of Sri Lanka's apparel industry in the key US markets. On the same note, the Exporters Association of Sri Lanka welcomed and commended the revised US tariff rates and added that this specific achievement reflects the strategic foresight, persistence and professionalism of the team in navigating a complex international trade environment to secure more favourable terms for Sri Lankan exporters. The association added that this development is a timely and much needed boost for Sri Lankan exporters, enhancing exporters' competitiveness in key global market and contributing to the broader recovery and growth of Sri Lanka's national economy.
Crunchy goodness for hunger on the go.
Now, Minister of Public Security and Parliamentary Affairs Anand Vijaypala says that 300 police officers have been suspended from active service during the past few months of the year. While addressing a gathering yesterday, the minister vowed to prosecute all public officials who break the law, notwithstanding their official titles and designations.
Appointment letters were awarded to 50 new recruits hired as operational assistants of the Department of Immigration and Immigration yesterday. The event was held under the patronage of Minister of Public Security and Parliamentary Affairs Anand Vijaypala and Deputy Minister Sunil Watagala.
Police Department විතරක් ජනවාරි ඉඳලා මේ ගෙවිච්ච මාස 6 ඇතුළත
300 police officers have been suspended from service since January this year. That is a massive number. 200 police officers were suspended from work in 2024. Officers are suspended as such when they are not devoted to their profession. They are suspended when they choose to be insensitive to the realities of how their salaries are funded. On certain occasions, some officers who have 25-year service records behind them get themselves suspended with no pension. The Controller General of Immigration and Immigration is in prison. The Inspector General of Police was incarcerated but is out on bail now as investigations proceed. The Commissioner General of Prison was imprisoned in a facility which was previously under his purview, although he too is now out on bail. Therefore, notwithstanding anybody's official titles, we will take legal action whenever somebody acts outside the boundaries of the law.
Now, pursuant to an order issued by the Minister of Transport and Highways, all passengers travelling on the rear seat of all vehicles taking the expressway will now be obligated to wear seat belts. In a bid to mitigate the increasing fatalities from motor traffic accidents, the government took gradual steps to impose a mandatory requirement for all drivers and passengers to wear seat belts pursuant to the provisions of the Motor Traffic Act. These efforts were initiated in early July when all bus drivers were ordered to wear seat belts mandatorily. The government then followed up by imposing the same rule on all drivers of light vehicles. Accordingly, the police have initiated traffic inspections and awareness campaigns along expressways since early today. Now, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa accuses the government of attempting to conceal the dire situation of sugar factories in Sevanagala and Palavatta. During a meeting with the opposition leader today, sugarcane farmers supplying the two factories today claimed that several issues the government pledged to resolve have not in fact been resolved as yet.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa met with sugarcane farmers supplying the Sevanagala and Palwatta sugar factories today to discuss their concerns.
මීට දින කිහිපයක පුරාවටම අපේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ අහන්න දකින්න ලැබුණා මේකට උත්තර හොයලා තියෙනවා කියලා මේ ආණ්ඩුවේ ඉන්න අමතවරු ඉතින් ගොවියෝ විදිහට අපි හරි කනගාටු වෙනවා අයිය අපිට මේ බොරු කියන්නේ මොකද අපේ ප්‍රශ්න එකක්වත් විසඳලා නැහැ ගරු විපක්ෂ නායකතුමනි මේ කාරණාව පිළිබඳව මමත්
MP Ranjit Madhum Bandara and I raised our voices both in and out of parliament regarding this issue, but the government ridiculed the plight of Sevanagala and Palavatta. They are attempting to portray that there is no crisis. A few days ago during an overseas visit, the president claimed that the country has saved up $1 trillion. If he is in possession of such a substantial sum of money, why can't he protect the Sevanagala and Palavatta factories? Why can't he pay the EPF installments which have been outstanding for 9 months? 300 million rupees are due to farmers and 400 million to suppliers. Boasting about the money is not enough. We demand that the government remove the 18% VAT and purchase these spirits. However, they will not do any of that because they are hamstrung by IMF conditions.
මොකද හේතුව? IMF කොන්දේසි වලට යට වෙලා.
And now here's a look at some thoughts shared in the political arena today over the President's entitlements repeal bill.
We issued a gazette notification revoking all unfettered privileges enjoyed by former presidents. This gazette applies to the incumbent president, Comrade Anurakumar Dissanayaka. The cabinet has taken a decision. It will be presented in parliament, and when it is passed, it will be enforceable in a court of law. The foremost objective of this draft bill is to throw former President Mahinda Rajapaksa out of Colombo and to confine him to Madamulana. It is pointless to call this bill the President's Entitlements Repeal Bill. Instead, calling it a bill to oust former President Mahinda Rajapaksa to Madamulana might be more apt, since that happens to be the government's underlying objective. I personally prefer legislative reforms that curb former president's ability to build large and luxurious homes. That is in fact a gross misuse of power. The general public is of the opinion that no president must be allowed to live luxuriously off taxpayer proceeds, despite the president being the best or the worst in history. Therefore, we too are of the opinion that laws must be passed to further the public's will. However, those reforms must be contingent upon one condition. The government must allocate adequate provisions to provide the necessary protection to all former presidents. No one will be kicked out arbitrarily. However, please know that many are ready to permanently transfer their houses and property to Mahinda Rajapaksa if he is kicked out of his residence in Colombo. He never took up residence at government accommodations when he lost at the polls. Even though he is not the executive president, he has a nominal presidential palace in every district. The incumbent government has a record of wanting what they previously rejected. Minister Lanka recently claimed that the president must be given the best security possible and that they cannot take that matter lightly. They seem to be proactively seeking what they promised they would refuse. They spun tales of how the country was launched into financial crises over accommodations and privileges provided to former presidents and ministers. However, the government's conduct alone has rendered those assertions to be completely false. They themselves enjoy certain privileges. Our government has taken up the task of putting an end to the colossal misallocation of public proceeds to accommodate the lavish lifestyles of former presidents. The incumbent government is executing that responsibility and mandate at the moment. Nobody personally sought these privileges. They were constitutionally guaranteed. The president must understand that his actions will later backfire against him. If he deems it unnecessary to guarantee the protection of former presidents and to ensure the provisions incidental thereto, he can present the relevant bill to Parliament and the Parliament can in turn pass it.
Former Minister S.M. Chandrasena was released on bail today after being produced before the Colombo Chief Magistrates Court. The former minister was arrested for the alleged unlawful distribution of maize seeds in the lead-up to the 2015 presidential election. Meanwhile, the son-in-law of parliamentarian Rohit Abegunawardena was also released on bail. MP Abegunawardana's son was taken into remand custody in line with probes launched into the sale of an unlawfully assembled vehicle.
Former Minister S.M. Chandrasena was arrested by the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery or corruption on the 4th of July. The minister was arrested over the alleged distribution of maize seeds in violation of established legal procedures, causing a 25 million rupee loss to the government in the lead-up to the 2015 presidential election. Legal proceedings instituted against the former MP continued today at the Colombo Chief Magistrates Court. During the hearing, officers of the Bribery Commission informed the court that the investigations into the incident are nearing completion. They further submitted that statements are yet to be recorded from several officers attached to the Ministry of Agriculture. Therefore, officers of the Bribery Commission sought a suitable order from the court to proceed accordingly. At the same hearing, Attorney-at-Law Chamindatu Korala took up the position that his client, that the former minister, has fully cooperated with the investigations and that there have been no allegations of witness intimidation or interference. Considering those circumstances, counsel for the defense moved the court to grant bail contingent upon suitable conditions. After reviewing the submissions made in court, the magistrate ordered that the suspect be released on a cash bail of 50,000 rupees along with two sureties of 5 million rupees each. The court also imposed an overseas travel ban on the suspect. The court then listed the case against former Minister S.M. Chandrasena to be taken up on the 9th of January 2026. In other law and order related updates, Danushka Veerakkodi, the son-in-law of parliamentarian Rohita Begunawardena, was also granted bail pursuant to an order made by the Magistrates Court of Matugama. Veerakkodi was arrested in line with investigations launched into the alleged possession of a vehicle deemed to be unlawfully assembled. According to the magistrate's order, MP Abe Gunawardena's son-in-law was released on 2 surety bonds of 2 million rupees each. Meanwhile, Rasika Buddhika Vitana, son of SJB MP Jagat Vitana, was also present in court while the relevant matter was taken up in court. Rasika Buddhika Vitana was also arrested by the authorities as part of probes against MP Abe Gunawardena's son-in-law and daughter. However, Rasika Buddhika Vitana was later released on bail.
Apico Next Gen. Make the leap to faster sleep.
හොඳම ෆෝන් එකක් ගන්න. ළඟම අපාන්ස් එකට යන්න.
Welcome back. Now in more local news, several awareness programs were held across the country today on the proposed educational reforms, including a discussion with teacher principal unions. However, some education sector unions objected to the reforms, citing dissatisfaction with the lack of detailed documentation and clear plans. Despite the objections, however, Prime Minister Dr. Harani Amarasuriya highlighted that feedback from educators was welcome and that improvements will be made based on the suggestions.
An awareness program regarding the proposed education reforms was held yesterday at the Temple of the Sacred Tooth Relic in Kandy with the participation of Prime Minister Dr. Harani Amarasuriya. During the program, the Deputy Chief Prelates of the Askiri and Malwatu chapters were briefed on the proposed reforms. The Deputy Chief Prelate of the Askiri chapter, Venerable Vendarue Upalitera, emphasized the importance of teaching history and aesthetics to nurture creative minds, highlighting that this is a globally recognized principle. He further highlighted that the new education reforms must be implemented in a manner that is fair to all students across the country. Meanwhile, an awareness program for teacher principal trade unions, including the Ceylon Teachers Union, the All Ceylon United Teachers Union, and the Sri Lanka Professional Principals Association, was held today at the Ministry of Education under the patronage of the Prime Minister. However, several teacher principal unions walked out of the session.
They are still conducting the same presentation that was presented across the country. Nothing outside the presentation was shared with any of us. Therefore, we walked out in protest. Without a proper document outlining the education reforms, these discussions are meaningless. They claim that reforms will be implemented next year from grades 1 to 6, yet they still have no clear plan for grade 1 students. We raised this issue with them. We strongly objected and decided to take action from today. We request the government to draft education reforms after receiving input from educators, education administrators, intellectuals and social activists.
In the meantime, other teacher principal trade unions shared their views after the program.
There will always be political and ideological differences. However, we set those differences aside and engaged in a productive discussion aimed at building a national education system.
While they expressed their support for the implementation of educational reforms, many suggestions were made pointing out areas that need improvement and development. We listened to all of them and we plan to address these concerns in the near future. This is the outcome we expected, and we are deeply grateful for the suggestions provided by those who will be responsible for implementing these reforms.
Moving on to your business news, the Colombo Stock Exchange closed in positive territory today as a result of price gains in counters such as HNB Bank, John Keel's Holdings and Commercial Bank. The ASPI gained 1.38% to close at 19,914.25 points, while the more liquid S&P Sri Lanka 20 gained 2.3% to close at 5,894.75 points. Market turnover crossed 7.3 billion rupees. Foreign participation in market activity remained at subdued levels, with foreigners closing as net sellers offloading shares worth 211 million rupees. With that, here's a look at today's foreign exchange rates. That's all for tonight from First at 9. For the latest developments around the clock, stay in touch with Ada Derana, the Sri Lankan news brand of international excellence. Thank you for joining. Have a great night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit adaderana.lk.